This is Lord Mad Dog, and today we're going to start a new little series, not actually a series, but a new little thing I'd like to do, and it's all about how I wish things worked. And this is talking about different game mechanics and how I wish they worked, and how they would be changed for different games. And today we're covering Space Engineers, and specifically building. Alright, so let's jump right on in. So for building in Space Engineers, it's pretty simple. If you've ever played any type of building game, it's got these little blocks, you clap them down and blah blah blah. And then they've also got these little advanced things like projectors. Here, where's that projector at? Of course, you know what a projector is, yes. And then the projector allows you to project things that you've already built in Creative World or any other world and actually use it to project your thing, and then you can build it from that. Now, I would have to say that building in Space Engineers is actually slightly better than most, because you put it down, and if you're not in creative mode like I am right now, let's go ahead and turn off creative mode. Alright, let's say I don't actually have the resources to this, so I can't actually put it down, but I should have given myself some more resources before I did that. But you put it down, and you need the resources, and then you weld it up. And that makes it, actually, it has a nice bit of realism that really makes it nice. But there are a few things in Space Engineers that just really could be better. Of course, every game is that way. But Space Engineers has its own thing. So the first thing that I really do not like is the thing that with projection. So projector, let's go ahead and select a random blueprint. All right. Yeah, here, this is perfect. This is exactly what, see, oh, interact grid size. Well, that's normal. Okay, I'm not sure if I have any grids. Yeah, I do. I have a grid that has, let's see, mobile space station. Mobile, there. And now it'll tell me multiple grids are not supported. Only the largest grid will be used. All right, that also worked for subgrids. Now, this grid here has landing platforms on pistons. And that is because this grid is supposed to be able to move off planet and in space and land back on planet. It's not a static grid. But you cannot use it, you cannot project the subgrid. So that means that anything that's connected to the subgrid, like its landing gear, will not actually be projected in here. So I'd have to manually replace those landing gear. If you make an advanced turret or anything advanced, you will have to build that manually because it will not be projected in. And I think that is one of the major things that seriously needs to be changed with the building in Space Engineers. It's something that should have been fixed years ago. Back after they added the projection in, it should have been fixed the very next update to allow multiple subgrids. And one of the reasons why they said they do not is because they don't want advanced build, they don't want too advanced stuff and clogging it. I don't agree with that. I think it's just laziness, and it needs to be done. And if you can't do it yourself, or you won't want to do it, then release the coding to let the community make mods so that we can do it. I think it should have been done right off the bat. Another thing I really love to see, and there's a lot of conflict with this in building, is being able to connect small and large grids freely. Now, there's a lot of problems with this, and I'll get into that later. But now we're going to actually talk about blocks, just basically block type. Basically, you've got two different types of block for armor. You've got light armor right here, like what I've got here, light armor. Go ahead and put this down. So let me go to, a regular. All right, here, we got regular little light blocks. It costs 5 steel plates to be, 25 steel plates to build one of these. All right, then you've got heavy armor. It's in here, 2, boom. And that cost 135 steel plates, 50 grid, and 15 steel plates. As you can imagine, that's a lot more, and it should have a lot more life. All right, but I would like to see this all change. So when they first added the ability to drill stone and get iron and different things from it, I was ecstatic. I thought, wow, that makes this game a viable game, and that's one of the reasons why I bought it. Because after that update. Before then, I wouldn't actually really want to get into it because it's just too much of a grind. However, this also kind of ruined the game in many ways, because now all you really ever have to do to build almost anything except for the most advanced components is just build a giant drill and drill down, and boom, you've got everything you need. And that's total. I understand why they did it, and it was absolutely totally needed, but it kind of ruined the game at the same time. So what would I like to see instead is for the building system, all blocks to be made different. So instead, when you first put down a block, it's got steel plates. I would like to see instead plastic. You can get plastic from drilling the ground. You get plastic and then you make plastic sheets, and plastic sheets can be then used to make different types of, you still have to build the motors and different things, but you get very little actual iron and very little nickel and very little silicone, so you can only build very basic components, but everything, when you first put it down, including your refineries, your large cargo containers, I wish it would use plastic instead of interior plates or steel plates, which both cost iron. Now what this would do is it would make these things be a lot lighter and have a lot less durability in life. However, durability in this life in this thing for steel plates is already abysmal, so I would actually leave your steel plate, your light armor plating, actually be the same amount of HP just because of how abysmal the life thing is. But then after steel plates, after plastic plates, which you get plastic from mining dirt, and very, very, very minute amount of nickel, iron, and silicone. Then after that, you would have another thing called alloy plates, which would be just a little bit of nickel and a little bit of iron to make alloy. And that would allow you to make, instead of steel plates, you make alloy plates. That would be the next tier for blocks, and that would take how many ever steel plates and alloy plates, and you put them right on top of the plastic plates. So to make plastic plates, you would first need plastic, then you would hit Shift P, which brings up, or P actually brings up your color picker, and there'd be a new tab in here, and that new tab would have in it the different stages of building. So let's say you start your plastic, then you got alloy, and then you would have steel, so steel plates, and then the light steel plate, then you'd have armored steel plates, which means it just costs more steel plates, or reinforced steel plate armor, and then you would have your combat steel, your combat armor, which would take grids, as they do now. So, and then you could paint every single object in your thing with that. It wouldn't necessarily need this, because it'd be a different tab, it wouldn't actually change the color, but just like you paint all of them, you would paint them with like this. So now let's say I'm upgrading it to, I'm upgrading it to combat steel. So that would mean that these things would go, let's say they're just right now only made out of plastic plates, and I can paint them with combat steel or heavy armor, and that would instantly mean that they would go into an unrepaired state, just like as if they had only got here like that. They would go into an unrepaired state, and then I would need to weld them up with the necessary resources. And if you then went back and, let's say after I welded this up and I wanted to go back down for that object only to be made out of plastic, then I would weld it back down to, I would make it plastic again by grinding it down and then just welding it up to be just plastic. So that's how I really wish building would work, different tiers of things. So if you wanted your cargo container to be super light and super easy to move, then it would, and you didn't worry about it actually getting destroyed, then you would just make it completely out of plastic. If you were worried about it being destroyed during combat, you would go ahead and make it a heavy combat steel armor, but that would make it a lot heavier and harder to move around. And that is basically what those major changes I would like to see to building. I know it doesn't add all that much, but it really would change the building dramatically. So instead of having multiple blocks for building giant ships, especially for PvP servers, you will often build 2 to 3 thick if you're going to build a combat ship. And instead, what this would do is that would make it so that you would basically only build 1 thick, and then you build all your components out of heavy steel armor, which would dramatically reduce the load on servers, because then you wouldn't need like 15,000 blocks to be able to defend yourself. You just have a regular block, and you can then also choose, if this vehicle you think it's going to need more than little plastic, then you're going to want to make it out of light steel or maybe just alloy, because you don't want it to break when you slightly bump into something. I think that would make a dramatic difference. It would add a lot more to gameplay, and it would also mean that you would once again have to go around and get iron, nickel, cobalt, and these different resources, the silicone, that you don't actually have to get anymore. Because like I said, all you have to do is just go ahead and oop, there goes that block, and build a giant drill and drill down into the ground, and that's all you're ever going to need. And I've done it many times. Yes, it may take you some time to get to your first drill, but after you get to your first large drill, that's it. You just drill giant holes in the ground, and that's all the stone and iron you'll ever need. Because I've gotten like close to like 5 million iron just out of drilling dirt, and it's like it ruins the entire exploration of Space Engineers, because you don't have to get these extra resources. There's no reason to get these extra resources. Okay, so that's the basics of building. Now I want to go into a little bit of realm of fantasy building here. I'm pretty good at texturing. I'm pretty good at modeling, but when my knowledge comes to making scripting and different things, I am subpar at most. Okay, at best. Okay, so and I know this is basically completely fantasy, what I'm going to talk about here, but I would love to see it be brought into reality. Okay, so the big problem with Space Engineers, and basically almost all building games I've ever seen, is that once you get your ship so big, the game just lags. I mean, your ship's so big, or your vessel, your building, your place, everything, it just lags out, because you have to render all the textures, you have to render all the polygons, and then you have to render the physics for each block as well. Like, if I were to shoot a gun at this thing now, I don't have a gun on me, but if I were to shoot the gun at it, it would have to process where I'm hitting it and whatnot. Now, there's some ways to cut back on that. Like backface calling, what that basically means is that polygons and textures that are not seen by your current rendering are not actually there. And you can see that begin. I think this game has it, because I've seen it a couple times when I zoom in too fast and the blocks don't load in immediately. Come flying around the vehicle on really heavy ones, the blocks don't load in really fast. I think it has some backface calling and maybe a few different things out of it. And I have to say also that Space Engineers has some of the best deformation in any of the building games I've seen. Okay, but that still has to render all these extra textures and everything, all these extra polygons, and when there's really no need to with modern technology to do that. And what I'd like to see is, after you build your ship, you place a block on it. I know this is fantasy, but let's say I place my block on it, and boom. What that would begin to do is it would then begin to join all the blocks into one block. So, and what that does is it means that it would take a process, it would take some time, but that would mean that instead of so many polygons, because there's a polygon, I don't know how many faces there is on each one of the polygons, but it would rebuild the mesh and rebuild all of it so that it would only be minimum amount of polygons and one texture in one place. And that would enable, just for rendering alone, that would enable it to be 1,000,000 times faster and take off the load. And also, when it comes to physics, that many small objects, like one block, means that it takes a lot more to render, a lot more to process. The more objects you have, the more processing it takes when it takes damage or interacts with physics. But if you have one large object and you have that deform in a different way, so you still be able to shoot straight through a block, but that block would not actually disappear. That's also something else that I'd really like to see, is the stuff. It really annoys me as a science buff. I'm not that big of a science buff, but it really annoys me that you can completely destroy matter in this game. So if I could pull out a gun here and I start shooting at this and I destroy that block, except for maybe a few steel plates that pop off of it, completely disappears from the game world. And that's just, you can't destroy matter. You can make it release energy, but if you were to make all this steel plate release the amount of energy it would take to make non-existent, you'd have basically a nuke blowing up in your face. And it's always annoyed me with almost every single creative game I've ever played, that you can totally destroy matter. So that's a little rant there. What I was saying, back to being able to render this as one solid object and calculate it as one solid object. You shoot through it, the block actually bends and you can shoot at it until it finally bends out of place. And no, this is you would have to completely rewrite the programming, but in the end it'd be a lot more efficient and a lot more hardware efficient, and you can then once again build gigantic ships, and that would also enable us to have small blocks on large blocks, because if it once you put that block on there and it takes the time to basically weld it all together. If you've ever played Kerbal Space Program, there's that one welding thing that turns all those blocks into that one welding mod. I don't know if it's still around, but back when I played Kerbal Space Program, they had a welding mod that turned them all the object into one object and joined their HP and whatnot. That was really nice. And made it so you could build gigantic ships. And it's basically the same principle, but with a lot more finesse and a lot more programming that would have to go into it. And it would make things so much better. Also, another thing that would really help is to have, instead of just like, let's go into the G menu here, we have refineries. All right, refineries.
Critical.
Oh, these are my own mods. I didn't realize I still had those in. But, so we got, oh wait, are these new? Oh, I don't think so. I think it's my own mods. Okay, so here's a refinery. Now, this is nice, but one refinery, when you have a lot of resources, can take hours and hours and hours, especially on the lowest setting, to refine out what you need. I mean, you're talking maybe it's a default settings to render out one of the ships I built during my gameplay through the series. It would have, I think I looked it up on the biomass calculator online, and it would have taken 30 days real life to render out with just one refinery. And so you can imagine, if you're working with the default settings, you could end up needing like 16, 17, maybe even all the way up to like 25 refineries, which means that this is a rather complicated block, okay? And which means the textures on it, it's really nice. It's some of the nicest artwork I've seen in building block building games. And that means that you're going to have 16, 20 of these that not only got to be rendered for texture and polygon count, but also during physics. What would I also like to see is larger version of each blocks put into game, just the base game. So I'd actually like to see a total factory built that you can, once you get to enough resources, you can actually plop down this massive factory block that has everything in it that you'll ever need. You know, it has the assemblers and the refineries and whatnot. That way you have less server load and you have less render load, because one object can equal many objects for one thing. Also, I think, I really think for program blocks, one large program block should equal 16 small blocks, so you don't have to have many program blocks on your ship. And even bigger cargo boxes would be awesome for this. This basically all entire thing to make the server load much, much smaller and enable you to build much bigger. Because after you get to a certain point, it just kind of, you get to the point where you're like, after the building point for most building games, including Engineers, after you get past like the halfway point and you start get towards the end game, the game just becomes so laggy and so useless that it's just, oh man, it's unplayable for most computers. And that's why there's the CPU limit. So like every, if you know anything about the CPU limit, and that's there for many reasons, but basically for processing. So each one of these heavy light armor blocks has one PCU. And that's because PCU actually pretty much, no, it's actually PCU, okay? PCU is actually basically, so to limit players so they can't build too big, and so there's not too much of a processing cost on large servers. And that's why the official servers have really, really small PCU limits. I jumped into one, and in like, I think like 3 hours of playing, I reached my PCU limit, and I'm like, what? And that's because servers have to render all that out. What this would enable to do, these changes I've talked about, would make it so the bigger things you build. So let's go and see what the refinery is. Refinery. There we are. A PCU for refinery, PCU cost is 90. Now, if you were to, let's say that you build 15 of them, it would cost, 15 times 90, it would cost you an amazing amount. But instead, you have bigger blocks, and so it would cost you less. That bigger block would cost less CPU because it would actually cost less less PCU. It's because it would actually cost less CPU processing. So I would love to see that implemented into the game because of the rendering and whatnot. Now, I think that's pretty much all I would really like to see for the building. I would really, really like to see the small blocks connected to large blocks unlimitedly, but I know that's completely fantasy. I don't think they'll ever do that, but I would really like to see that done as well. And what I was talking about, I hope I was able to explain exactly what I was talking about. Tell me what you think about it in the comments. And that's pretty much all there is. I hope you have enjoyed me ranting and raving and wishing things were different, like I plan to do for a few different episodes on Engineers yet, and then move on to other games. If you have, like, shares, and comments. And my thing, I would really much enjoy it. Lord Mad Dog, signing off. Oops. I almost forgot something. Actually, I did totally forget it. There is also one other small change that I really would like to see, and that's, once again, to projectors. Projectors, when you click on a projector, you hit the blueprint, and then you select it like you've seen me do there. You see this? Wrong size. I keep doing that. Projector. You click on it, and it comes into play. Here it goes. This is a bigger one. Multiple grids are not supported. That's what I was talking about. All right, it comes into play, and boom, it automatically just plops where. And then to get it to move to where you want it, it takes an insane amount of finagling here. So then you have to go back to it, and then you have to come down here to this little thing, and you can put all that you can. Right click, hit G menu, and put it all into your control block and whatnot. But it's really messy. Or you can do it this way with your screen half visible. Half see-through, which actually I believe is almost a better way than doing it that. But what I would really like to see what happens is when you click on your blueprint. You select your blueprint, and then this new GUI pops up. All right, this all goes bye-bye, and instead you get the view from another camera. Like boom, you get a camera like this pops up, and you're able to move in and zoom out in that area. And your keys, new keys come up there on the lineup on the bottom, just automatically. And you would push them left, right, and then you would just move it to where you want it. Move it to where you need it, and then you hit OK or escape, and you exit that menu. I would think that would make things so much better, and it wouldn't take much time for the devs to add this piece to the game. It would make projectors so much more usable and so much better. Instead of spending 15-20 minutes every time you bring in a projector to fiddle it into the right position, it's just so easy. Maybe even make it so it's your WASD, it changes your WASD, Q, and E, or even actually just use the normal block system of laying, so you can flip the blocks like you do with QE with your end up, page down, end, and insert keys, and use your WASD to move your projector around. I think that would be so much better, make things so much easier, and it wouldn't take them more than, well, let's be probably about 2 days worth of UI working to get this into game. And I think it would just be an amazing thing for them to do for projectors, and I think it'd make the game so much better just by doing that little bit of work. And yep, that's about it. Once again, Lord Mad Dog, signing off.